bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member for Indi.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise tonight to speak about the Fair Entitlements Guarantee Amendment Bill 2014 on behalf of the workers in my electorate of Indi, and to make suggestions to further help workers protected by this legislation and taxpayers who carry the financial burden of this protection. The Fair Entitlement Guarantee Scheme has been critical for a group of Wangaratta workers who found themselves employed one day and without stable work the next, through no fault of their own. Simply known as FEG, this government scheme provides a government-funded safety net for workers who are often suddenly left without a job and without redundancy pay entitlements when companies are liquidated and are unable to pay the entitlements to workers. Sadly, this was the case for 59 Bruck Textile Technology workers in Wangaratta, in my electorate, who unfortunately lost their jobs suddenly on July the 11th this year. Circumstances meant that they were left with no entitlements. Many had been with the company for decades, and the sudden liquidation of the company, which had been an icon in Wangaratta and the textile industry for 70 years, came as a tremendous shock to the workforce and especially to the local community. FEG was immediately spoken about as a government mechanism in place to assist these workers by paying out many outstanding entitlements. This was valued at $3.8 million. And workers, supported by advocates from the Textile, Clothing and Footwear Union, and to this union I would like to acknowledge them and thank them for their excellent advocacy and terrific ability to work across difference. The workers were worried, however, that these payments would take up to 6 months to come through. They believed that 2 months would be the best-case scenario. So one of the most pleasing aspects of this sad tale was the fact that FEG payments were made more quickly than people in the textile and clothing industry had ever seen occur. I asked the government to allow the workers access to the scheme as quickly as possible, and the Minister for Employment, Senator Eric Abetz, and his department are to be thanked for making good on his commitment to expedite the FEG to get the outstanding payments paid as soon as possible, and for these workers to have been paid most of what they were owed by Bruck Textile Technology within 6 weeks. The government is to be commended for its action, for its swift and decisive action, and I'm personally very grateful to the Minister for the work that he did. On August the 22nd in Wangaratta, I spoke with redundant workers at a skills workshop. I quickly learned that while they were extremely grateful for the FEG payments and to the work that me and my staff had done with the government, they wanted the government to take action to improve the scheme. And to these comments I address my thoughts now. Firstly, they asked us to ensure that workers got all the entitlements they were owed, and secondly, to legislate to protect workers from the action and the negative impact of companies such as Bruck Textile Technologies. Regarding the workers' entitlements, they told me that not all the accrued and banked time was paid. They felt that they weren't paid their full dues, which in normal circumstances, when leaving employment, they would have been paid out of these entitlements. The redundant workers felt strongly that they are not to blame for the way their employment was terminated, a feeling which I share. And regarding the larger issue of Bruck's action as a corporate entity, the redundant workers were angry that the taxpayer was carrying the financial burden for what had occurred. They believed that the company had a responsibility to meet its corporate fiduciary obligations. And some of the workers have spoken with me about their feelings of embarrassment and invalidation. They don't want to rely on charity or to be seen to relying on handouts. The redundant workers also do not want their former colleagues or any other employee in Australia to go through what they did when suddenly made redundant. This says a lot about the caring nature of these people who are in my community. They're not looking for, who are now out looking for work and face an uncertain future. Fundamentally, they care for their families and for the communities and do not want to see their experience felt by other people. The workers came up with a key message and asked me to pass it on to this parliament. Don't let this happen again. Protect the people still working and draft legislation to be enacted to ensure workers who are forced to have access to FEG are paid their full entitlements, such as accrued time and bank time. And legislation needs to be enacted to stop companies from relying on FEG to pay entitlement. But it wasn't only me who had a task to do when I left that workshop. Kerry Seymour, a long-term Bruck employee, left the workshop and that day put together a petition to the House on this issue. This petition is now with the Petitions Committee, and I will table this document as soon as it is returned to my office. Charles Sargent, a worker made redundant by Bruck, has written to me to propose some powerful and reasonable measures the government should consider to strengthen the oversight of companies. Ensure adequate powers rest with ASIC or other regulators to monitor and investigate companies to prevent a reliance on FEG, to increase the security on the conduct of company directors when the company has initiated liquidation, to hold the management of liquidating companies individually liable for failing to provide for the payout of employee entitlements. Minister Pyne's second reading speech on this bill affirms the government's support for FEG as a necessary safety measure, but one that should be used as an exemption and a scheme of last resort. When I met with the CEO of Bruck on the day the redundancy notice was handed to workers, I asked him what provision Bruck was making to provide entitlement to those made redundant, and the director said openly that FEG would provide these entitlements. Mr Deputy Speaker, in closing, I am very proud that the workers in Wangaratta look to my office for assistance. I am very proud that we have been able to help them. I am very proud that I can deliver the relationship of government from the position of being an independent that really works for the people of Wangaratta. I'm absolutely proud to be a representative of these workers. And in conclusion, I ask that the government goes further than simply limiting the payments available under FEG. If this is the only change that is made to the scheme, it may simply hurt those who may come to rely on FEG in the future without ensuring that fewer companies rely on FEG. Mr Deputy Speaker, I call on the government to do more to ensure that companies genuinely make provision for large redundancies so that FEG can genuinely become a scheme of last resort than simply a corporate offload. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank